Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I have a very special guest. Her name is Erika Mayall, and she is from British Columbia. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing very well, except for the technical stuff. I don't know. It just, whatever. It's all good. We're here, most importantly. I'd like to do a quick introduction, if you don't mind. So my very special guest today is Erika Mayall, as I said, is a registered physiotherapist with a special interest in dance medicine and dance injury prevention. She has a passion for working with performing artists of all ages and from a variety of disciplines. Erika graduated with a Master of Physical Therapy degree from the University of British Columbia, and previously she graduated with an Honours Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology here in London, Ontario at Western University. Beautiful university. Since graduation, she has gone on to complete extensive postgraduate training, which has led to a diploma in advanced manual and manipulative physiotherapy, as well as certification in medical acupuncture. I love acupuncture, by the way, through the Acupuncture Foundation of Canada. Her focus is on dance and performing arts related to injuries, and she has a keen interest in not only treating dance injuries, but also preventing injuries and maximizing performance potential for each and every dancer. Erika is an active member of the International Association of Dance Medicine and Science and Healthy Dancer Canada. She has been invited to present on the topic of dance medicine at conferences locally, nationally, and internationally. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you.
How is your day going besides all the glitches that we had today?
Really good. We're just in the process of reopening things here in BC. So I was able to reopen the physio clinic on Tuesday of this week. So it's been a little bit busy getting back into the swing of things, getting used to new protocols, all sorts of things, but it's good. It's really nice to be back.
Good. Yes, I guess it is. It just feels good to get back to work. And for you especially, you do need to be in the clinic for sure, you know.
Yeah.
I know you said you'd been doing some virtual, helping clients virtually. How was that for you, by the way?
It's been really great. I was a little bit hesitant maybe, for lack of a better word, to start out with. Just, I wasn't sure how easy it would be from like the technology side of things and things like that, but it's worked out really, really well. It's been something I've done a little bit of in the past for people who don't live in town, like people from out of the city or out of the province. So I'm a little bit familiar with doing sessions virtually anyway. So the transition for me was actually like pretty smooth, pretty well received. And even during this time of the clinic being shut in person here, almost half of the people I was seeing virtually during that time were actually still people from out of town. I actually ran the numbers just the other day, and it was 44% of the people I had seen virtually during that, I think it was 9 weeks that we were shut here. About 44% of them were from out of like the city of Vancouver, like sort of from out of town. So they were people who wouldn't have ever come into my clinic anyway. So yeah, it was actually pretty okay.
So it worked out okay. So for instance, if we had someone here in Ontario that wanted to work with you, are you able to work with them as a client?
So as far as like physiotherapy goes, our licenses are specific to our province. So if I'm going to bill it as physiotherapy and somebody wants to like claim it on their insurance plan or that sort of thing, they do have to be located in the same province as us. That being said, I do a lot of just virtual consults, especially with dancers who are all over, like from the States or from wherever, where I'm not billing it as physiotherapy. They're not doing it. Sometimes it's because they have an injury, but a lot of times it's more that sort of performance enhancement. They're struggling with something, whether it's turnout or flexibility or something, and they want sort of an assessment to see, okay, what can I do? Is it something to do with my anatomy? Like, how can I work on this? So those sorts of consults I can do with anybody all over the world. So certainly could do with people in Ontario. But yeah, if we're billing it as physiotherapy, like under sort of like, insurance and that sort of thing, then it has to be people within British Columbia.
That makes sense. Well, it's really exciting though. I think, well, except for technology for me, I don't know, it's not working, but the fact that you can do that and work with dancers from all over the world is really exciting. Really, really exciting. Yeah. What a great job you have, my dear.
Yeah.
So we had talked a little bit earlier today about training the dancer and how a lot of the dancers have had to move or be encouraged to move to online classes. I think virtually all over the globe, dance teachers are online. I spoke with a couple of dancers from Scotland not that long ago, one being a teacher, one being a student, and
Mhm.
just sort of getting some ideas of, what it feels like to take a class virtually. And it's the same everywhere. I mean, it's just everywhere. It's the same. So
Yeah, and
uh,
company dancers and student dancers and everyone. Yeah.
it is everyone. So, of course, dancing at home for everyone. I mean, it's what we're doing, and all the teachers are doing their very best to keep the dancers safe and healthy. But often dancers like to, go a little crazy and maybe sometimes take an advanced class that's not necessarily at their level. So I'm sure you've seen a few challenges that have come your way. Let's just discuss those right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely we've seen a few things. Actually, the thing I mean, there's been a little bit of dancers maybe dancing beyond their capability or that kind of thing. But the thing I've seen more of is like people who've injured themselves with like hazards in their dance environment. So, stepped, like done a kick and stepped on a water bottle and rolled their ankle, or ended up kicking a piece of furniture, or things like
Is
that.
that right? Okay.
More hazardous. Some
Oh
dancers are dancing on really slippery floors. Other dancers are dancing on concrete. Some are in their backyard on grass. Like it's sort of the whole gamut. So we have seen some interesting things pop up with regards to that for sure.
And nothing too serious then, I hope.
Not so.
So far. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I know the kids, they just really want to dance and they want to be with their friends, and this is as good as it's going to get for a bit. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so the dance schools in your area are starting to open up. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I don't know if any have officially opened yet. They are going to be included in this phase that we're currently going through. I think most studios that I have heard from or have been in communication with, their plan is June 1st. So we have like another sort of week or so to go. It is going to be interesting. I mean, they're doing a really great job of implementing all of the like physical distancing principles. It looks different in every studio. I know some studios are keeping all the students in the same studio, and then teachers are rotating through studios so that there's less crossover of people in different studios. Other places are, taping grids on the floor, and each dancer has to stay in their little box or bubble or whatever it is. And, some studios are lucky that they have like front doors and back doors. So dancers come in one door, go out another door, things like that. So there's all sorts of things to consider, but I think by and large, studios are getting prepared and ready and excited to welcome the dancers back. And I think most dancers are keen to come back. I know some studios I think are going to open with just doing private lessons to start, see how it goes, and then start to introduce more smaller groups and that sort of thing. So every studio has to kind of do what works for them to fit within the guidelines that have been set out by the province.
Absolutely, absolutely. So dancers coming back after doing their Zoom classes, what could you recommend to the dancers in terms of, how to get back into dance? What would you recommend to keep their bodies?
Yeah, and I mean, that depends a little bit on what dancers have been up to while they've been off. So some dancers are dancing very full schedule still and, at home, and maybe not totally ideal situations, but they're doing a similar number of classes and hours that they would be doing in the studio. They probably will have a little bit of an easier transition back to the studio. There's other dancers that for various reasons have done either very minimal or even no dance during this entire time. So for them, we need to treat it a bit more like we would coming off of like, say, summer break, where you kind of have the same thing. Some dancers might have danced a lot in the summer, some might not have, but you could sort of try, like in September, I think most teachers do a really good job of really trying to like ease dancers back into it and slowly, start with the basics and slowly build their way up. And so really we want to sort of use those same principles coming back, which is going to be a bit more challenging because there are some sort of competitions and stuff that are potentially running during the summer here. So all of that, again, a little bit up in the air, but there are some events that are planned for the summer. And so I think studios are going to have to balance the pressure of managing dancers who have done varying amounts of activity over the last few months with, trying to get dancers ready for the stage or competition or whatever that looks like. So, I mean, I guess my recommendation is to really try and ease back into it as much as you can and sort of treat the whole group of dancers as if they haven't really been doing a whole lot. Most dancers, even if they've been doing a lot at home, haven't necessarily been doing a lot of like big jumps or traveling work or things like that. So they might be doing a lot of hours at home, but it's likely been a lot of like technique and bar and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's going to be sort of need to be a little bit of a slow, gradual re-entry into the swing of things.
That's great advice. For the dancers that are home training, because as you just mentioned, it can be a little more limiting in terms of, they're not getting the full spectrum of the class, and the class structure is going to be different, obviously. What could you recommend for the dancers that are at home, let's say just doing like a ballet bar or just a floor bar, or so they can balance that up a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, it's great that dancers are having this chance to focus on like very specific technique and placement and alignment and all of that. And I think a lot of dancers have really embraced this opportunity to really hone in on really specific technical things that have always been goals of theirs, but it's kind of take a back burner when there's lots of other loftier goals. So that's been fantastic. But the downside of that is that we often end up doing a lot of repetition when you're working on the same thing really intricately for a long amount of time. So an example of that is dancers, if they're doing a lot of work at the bar, or even primarily doing work at the bar, we're probably working a lot on leg extension and leg height. And all that work tends to be quite sort of hip flexor dominant, or quite heavy in the hip flexors. We don't use a lot of our like bigger power muscles that we would use for jumping or traveling work, like our glutes and things like that. So in that case, given that we have those limitations and can't be doing the jumping and the traveling and all of that, I would recommend dancers trying to incorporate a little bit of sort of conditioning or cross training or specific exercises for some of the muscles they're not using as much. So the glute muscles or things like that, just to try and balance things out a little bit so that they're trying to, keep things as balanced as possible, recognizing that it's not the most ideal situation. The other thing is really using this time to try and do some cross training. Dancers are notoriously bad at not doing appropriate cross training.
This is interesting.
Because of, well, because of the hour.
Again, so you really hear you.
Dancers are not good at cross training, and I will just come out and flatly say that. And as like a dancer growing up, I'm exactly the same. And part of it is just the constraints of the schedules. If you're dancing 20 or 30 hours a week, it's hard to fit that in, but it's so important from an injury prevention perspective. So this is like the ideal time to go and ride a bike, or go for a hike, or go for a run, and hopefully people are somewhere in the world where they're allowed, the places where they've sort of had to shelter in place and not been allowed to do like outdoor recreation. But luckily in BC, we've had access to the outdoors the whole time, and I have seen more people out biking and rollerblading and things like that. So I think it's a great opportunity for dancers to get to do some other activities as well that they wouldn't normally get to do.
Exactly, using different muscle groups too, right? Firing those muscles up for sure. Actually, you had mentioned you were a dancer, and want to talk a little bit about that. So tell us a little bit about, you went from a dancer to a physiotherapist, and quite well known at that, very respected in your field. So tell us a little bit about how this all started with dance and how you transitioned into physiotherapy.
Yeah, so I've danced basically as long as I can remember. My sister danced, like I have an older sister, and she danced, and so I would like get dragged along to the classes. And so I've just sort of always danced right the way through. And when I was probably around 14 or so, had a few little injuries, nothing that was like really major or catastrophic, but things that like led me to go to physio. And I was lucky that we have some really great physios in the area, but who were very sport focused. And so I would go and I would say, I'm struggling when I do X, Y, Z. And actually the first injury that I went to physio for was a foot injury, and it was related to doing some point work was the thing that made it worse. And so I know, I go in and I say, oh, well, when I do this, this is what's happening. And the physios were like, well, why do you stand on your toes? Like they had no background. Like one of the physios had been like a, semi-pro basketball player, and they were like fabulous therapists. They actually both still practice
Why
today.
would you stand on your toes, really?
Exactly. Why do you need to get your leg up above your head? Like, you're plenty flexible, it's fine. And so things like that, where, it wasn't that they didn't know the sort of physiotherapy side of their job, but they really just didn't have a great understanding of the dance world. And they were willing to learn about it when I sort of could explain it, but that's not the same as having somebody who really intimately knows that world. And so I kind of always knew I wanted to go into something medically related. For a while, I thought I wanted to be a sports medicine doctor, but sort of things like that. And so then this idea of like, what if there was a physio who like specifically knew what dancers were talking about, sort of was an idea that presented itself. So I finished high school still dancing, and I actually went into dance teaching initially like, and just kind of when I was in high school, I did some student teaching and thought that maybe, oh, maybe I'll go into like dance teaching, but quickly realized that the part of sort of dance teaching that I really, really enjoyed was actually like the alignment and the technique and the anatomy. Like I was very much looking at it from like an anatomical perspective. I wasn't overly interested in things like that. Yeah. And so then ended up branching and finally decided that physiotherapy would be like the right place for me to be. And then with that sort of always having that goal of specializing and being a little bit niche so that I can, I mean, I always sort of say like I speak the dancer's language. They come in and if it's a new client who doesn't know me or like a new parent coming in and they're like, well, they do this thing where and they kind of start to try and describe it. And I'm like, oh, like when you développé or whatever it is. And they're like, oh, you know that. And you can see that all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, now I can just speak my own language and explain what's going on in my body.
Yeah, you know what? I like that how you said that, speak my own language, because it is a language all of its own. It really is.
Absolutely.
And growing up as a dancer, when I danced with a company, you know, I'd be at the physiotherapist, and it was so frustrating for me. I mean, they did their job very well, but it was just sort of I felt like I was being put into a template, you know, and this is what we're going to fix, and they helped fix it, but it just didn't quite make it the way I needed to work for me when I needed to perform. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's that last little bit of like not just fixing the issue, but then taking that into the performance side of things, because dance and other artistic sports are different than, say, soccer or basketball or sort of more traditional sports, where not only do we need to physically be able to do whatever move it is we need to be able to do, but we also need to make it look a certain way in the process. So in other sports, it doesn't matter if when you kick the ball, it looks ugly, as long as the ball goes in the net where you want it to go. Like nobody's looking at your technique or your form or anything like that, as long as you can get the job done. But in dance or gymnastics or diving or figure skating, any of the artistic sports, really that like artistic or the aesthetic side of it makes a really big difference. And so it's that last little bridge between just like healing an injury or recovering an injury versus getting back to being able to like perform or execute it in like an artistic way.
Yes, we need more of you across Canada, maybe all over the world. Maybe we'll just clone you. I can't figure out how to get the computer to work, but maybe we'll just clone you. I think I can figure that out.
And it's a like growing field for sure. Like when I first started, I actually went to Australia and did some of my training in Australia, because there are parts of the world where it's a much more developed field than it is in Canada. Canada's a little bit behind the ball. Mm-hmm. So I did some of my training in Australia where it's much more commonplace. New York City has a great sort of dance physiotherapy scene, and parts of Europe have a really active scene as well. Okay. But it's starting to expand across the country and like throughout the US, and social media has really helped with that. There's like lots and lots of people sort of active, mm-hmm. especially on Instagram, who are, specialize in this niche area in their communities. And so it is becoming more prevalent. There's more access for dancers, but there's certainly still spots where there aren't people who like specialize or who sort of know what they're doing. I'm going to plug Healthy Dancer Canada for a second.
Yes, please do. I was just going to get that.
Yeah. So there are organizations, you mentioned two of them when you were introducing me, but one of them is Healthy Dancer Canada, and the other one is the International Association of Dance Medicine and Science. They do really similar work, but obviously Healthy Dancer Canada is within Canada and the international one is international, but both of them have directories on their website. So you can, if you live in a specific area, go to the website, and if you're looking for whether it's a psychologist or a physiotherapist or a sports medicine doc or a surgeon or whoever you're looking for, you can find people in your area. And again, there are gaps geographically where there aren't people, but there is sort of a pretty good net. Sort of know one or two people in every province who then have their own networks. And so we are becoming much more closely connected, and there are people doing very similar work kind of across the country and internationally as well.
I really like that. When I upload this to the social media, I'll make sure that I put those websites in there for the dancers and their parents as well. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Now, there are, I've been in dance my entire life as well, but I find sometimes I'll work with a dancer and, you know, they'll complain of something, and I say, you know, it would be a good idea at this point to see a physiotherapist. You know, or go to your doctor and get a referral to a physiotherapist. But I find sometimes that it doesn't get translated to from the child to the parent, and I don't always have contact with the parent. And often the parents are busy, or they maybe don't understand what a physiotherapist, the purpose of a physiotherapist. So without going into too much, maybe this would be a good platform to inform everyone of the importance of, I'm going to speak as a dancer because that's what I am, but anyone that's really an athlete, a figure skater, like you've mentioned, in gymnastics, they really need to be connected with physiotherapists. It's part of the development and the training and the care of the body. So maybe you can help with that a little bit, and this is a great platform for that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I always talk about it as like, you need your team. And so for some people, and depending on what community you live in and who you jive with, like it may actually be like a chiropractor and not a physio, or it may be but I always sort of encourage dancers, yes, to have like their team of people. And when we talk, because this is a conversation that comes up a lot in terms of like, well, when should they see that person, and how do I know if they should see that person, and that sort of thing. And I really encourage people to try and get in the habit of having like semi-regular checkups, like you would to go to the doctor or the dentist or that sort of thing, before there's an issue. Because if you have somebody who does an assessment, so I do what we just call like a common, where we'll just look at all sorts of things like posture and muscle balance and range of motion and flexibility, like all sorts of different things. And if we have a really good baseline, and I have an idea, and I've seen this dancer once a year or once every 6 months for this kind of baseline checkup, if something starts to go wrong and all of a sudden they're noticing that they are struggling with like certain moves or steps, or they're having pain or an injury or something like that, I can kind of go back and say, oh yeah, like this isn't normal for you. Or we can, I mean, in the ideal world, we want to prevent all that before it happens. In the dance world, that's not going to happen. We're not going to prevent everything, but it's really, really helpful to have like a baseline. So it depends a lot on like how much a dancer is dancing, at what level they're dancing at, when that happens. Like, do I need to see every 6-year-old dancer? No, absolutely not. But once kids start to get more serious, and that often corresponds to like adolescence, so their bodies are changing, they're increasing their number of hours that they're doing things, are all of a sudden starting to get like a lot more technically difficult right around that same time. That tends to be when we'll start to like try and see them regularly, just to have baseline checks to make sure that they are, you know, not at risk for developing certain injuries or that kind of thing.
Well, sure, because it can be very preventative, because you would see the body and you would already see where the deficiencies are in terms of the physicality, the movement, lack thereof, and you'll be able then to, you know, maybe give that dancer some exercises to take home to help them ease into, because as a former dancer, you know what's coming, you know,
yes,
you know, as
absolutely.
a dancer, the development and how that's going to progress, and you can already anticipate what the challenges might be for that dancer, because no body is perfect. Well, maybe there are, I don't know, but I don't think there are.
Every body is different.
Everybody's different. Yes, we all, you know, we have our, I always say the left side and the right side. I would never say that to the students. I say you're equal on both, but I have a favorite side too. Yeah, so, and that creates an imbalance in itself. So, no, that's great. So you're thinking around adolescence then, or pre-adolescence?
Yeah, and that tends to be. So again, if there's a dancer who's had like issues prior to that, we might see them younger. Or if they're a less serious dancer, you know, they just are doing it recreationally once or twice a week, then it might not be as critical for them. But for those dancers that are, you know, in a competitive program or in a pre-professional type training program and dancing upwards of like 10, 15, 20 hours a week, then generally right around, or ideally right before adolescence, but I mean, we can't always time that. So
of course, yeah,
somewhere in that neighborhood is usually when we will sort of start to recommend that they gather their team of people together.
I like that. Gather your team of people. That's what we should have called that today. No, that's really, you know, that's fantastic. And because it's not really, it's interesting, because I think that as a dancer, dance educator, you just get an autopilot. You just know it, and you're training your dancer. But there's all these other aspects of it that, you know, the dancer will come and say, oh, you know, Miss Kim, my ankle is bothering me in this area. I'll say, please see your doctor, recommend a physiotherapist, or I can recommend a physiotherapist. But it's just not talked about enough. So I love that whole idea of having a team, and you really do need to have that. That's actually very smart. I like it. I do. I really
The
like
other thing, just to add like one more little
Mhm.
piece to that we have found really helpful, sort of with like studios I work with here is, and just other colleagues I know who do similar things, but I will often go into a studio and do like an education session for a parents' night. And so whether
Oh,
it's like a
fantastic.
fundraising thing or whether it's just an information thing, and often we'll pick a topic that whatever that topic happens to be about, but just so that they sort of have a connection to somebody in the community. And a lot of the studios will do it with like a nutritionist, and they'll do it with a psychologist. And so the students and the families are familiar with people in the area. And not everyone's going to jive with every other person. And so it's not like every dancer necessarily needs to come see me, but I want them to know that they, should have somebody that they go to. So one way for studios to be able to sort of facilitate that, because one thing I hear really commonly from teachers is sort of what you were saying, you recommend that they go and that it doesn't always get followed up on. But if the parent is like, oh, wait a second, I went to that info night and she was talking about XYZ, maybe I'll look her up. Like, you might find that there's a little bit more follow through. And so for the studios to sort of do a little bit of legwork to find people in their community who might be interested and then bring them in for info sessions or something like that can create like a much better sense of community and just foster communication a little bit better as well.
I think that's really important, because as a parent putting a child, I put my son in hockey, so I knew nothing about hockey. I mean, I know much more now, but I really didn't know. I mean, coming from a dance background, I knew that you needed a chiropractor, physiotherapist. He needed to be checked regularly. If he complained, but I got him right away. That's only because I grew up as a dancer. But had I not, I'd be like, I don't know, just figure it out. It's not necessarily a good thing. Thanks. This is some really great information. I know we talked earlier, and I definitely want you back again. I have a gazillion questions for you, but I don't want to wear you out. So thank you. Extremely knowledgeable, and we definitely need more of you around. I do have a question about, or a comment about the dancers who are dancing at home. And I just want to kind of pull back a little bit to this self-isolation, and again, things are starting to open up slowly, safely, as they should. But some of the the dancers that I've chatted with, they're not down per se, but they're struggling with the fact that they're not able to go to school and hang with their friends, or they're missing that social aspect. And then they might play soccer or a sporting activity, and of course dance, and they're missing. I think they're really missing their hugs and their chit chats and their lunchtime together. And I don't know. I feel like they've just been troopers through all of this. So maybe you could give some words for these youngsters that might be listening.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It's been really, really hard for that generation, and that sort of uncertainty of like, do we get to go back to dance this year? Do we go back to school this year? Like, especially for like the graduating dancers. So I would say, I mean, this maybe goes a little bit more back to the studios, but that opening, like if you are able to open, and so in BC, it's looking like in the next like week or two, I think the biggest benefit to reopening is going to be for dancers' mental wellness and mental health, and is not necessarily going to be for their physical well-being. And yes, there's going to be benefits for them to be able to dance in a studio and better sprung flooring and things like that, but really taking the chance to embrace like their mental health and wellness and checking in with them and giving them a chance to like chit chat with each other. And I know a lot of teachers have been doing that on Zoom, taking the first 10 minutes of class for all the dancers to check in, and there's been some great stuff that way. But just being able to see each other in the room, I think is going to be really important. And so again, for the dancers, like take that opportunity, like get to chat, and you're not going to get to hug each other, but at least you get to dance together, and you can connect through the dance. And just being able to feel the energy of everyone else in your group in the same room is completely different than just seeing all of them on a screen when you're dancing alone. And so I think that's going to be really powerful for dancers to be able to get back and do. And I was actually chatting with a dancer this morning, and her studio is doing they're having their tech class today out in or on a field or a park. Anyway, it's a beautiful day here today. They decided instead of doing it on Zoom, they're going to go do it outside all together. And she was so excited about it.
Sure,
Just for an
absolutely.
opportunity to leave her house, but also, you know, to dance in a group
Yes.
of people instead of just with a screen. So there's going to be really, really powerful moments that happen just
I
for
know.
dancers being able to reunite.
Yeah, just hearing you say that's quite emotional, actually. I feel for the kids. I do. And as a
Yeah.
teacher, I'm dying to get back in the studio myself whenever that is and whenever I'm allowed back in. But this has been a great chat today. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, you will come back again? I kind
Yeah.
of poke you a little bit. Amazing. Well, thank you again. This has been very informative. I'm going to upload everything to social media. If anyone has any questions, feel free to post them. I'll make sure that Erika gets them, and then I think she'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll definitely put the links for the other two websites that you mentioned previously. So
Yeah, great.
Great. Well, thanks again. Thanks so much. And you have
Yeah,
yourself an
thank you for
amazing
having
day.
me.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.